Great. Thank you for inviting me. It's my pleasure to be in front of you all. Just by way of introduction, my name is Sam Michael. As you hear, I'm the Chief Executive of Gas Marketing. We are an AI and automation response marketing company. And just to put this into some perspective, when I talk about AI response marketing, humans command and AI then responds at scale. So I'm going to take you through basically three parts to this discussion. It's going to be the past, it's going to be the present, and about the future. But each one of the elements of the past, present, and future is really going to be talking to you about some of the elements that I have built into my own personal growth levers. And hopefully, if you can take on one, two, or three, or whatever, even one is absolutely fine. But this will just give you a view of how I have continuously reinvented myself to the place that I am. So without going into much of the introduction, I think the presentation itself or the chat will hopefully give you a bit more perspective. So next. Can you put the next slide, please? I can still see just the front one. Kat, if you've got the presentation, will you present the next slide, please? Thank you. Just a very quick introduction, which I think is really important for all of us to realize, and that is every business stalls. Every business goes through problems, and you need to see it in a different light. You can't see it as, oh, it's failed, it's all over, fall over. No, that's not what it's about. It's not a failure. It's really a signal to reboot. And I actually really once built a business, or was the chief executive of a business that actually grew out of business itself. And I'll share that story with you in a moment. Next, please. Okay, so there's three chapters. First of all, the past. And when I talk about the past, it's where some of my growth levers were forged, right? There's 9 stories, there's 9 lessons. Hopefully you can learn from them. I'll then talk about the present, where I've basically coupled all of the levers, the growth levers that I've built for myself and that I live by. This is really the engines and how they were built. And then I'll give a little bit of insight in terms of what the future, my view on the future. I'm not a prophet. It's not Samuel the prophet. It's Samuel for prophet, yes, but not the prophet. So just to put that into some sort of perspective. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'm going to start off by sharing with you. And by the way, if you wouldn't mind, keep your questions for the end, so I can go through this whole process, and then I can answer whatever questions you may or may not have. So I want to talk about my past, where I came from, what I've learned before I knew that I was even learning. Next. So I started off, basically, typically. I went to school in South Africa, in Northview. I qualified and then went to university, and I qualified as an attorney and became a partner in a law firm. It's actually quite interesting because when I began my professional career as an attorney, law gave me 2 gifts that no marketing course could ever give me. The first one is objectivity. It is so important in the world of marketing to be completely objective. We often get caught up in our own perspective on how things are. Being objective is really important. Like, for instance, in the classroom, or in a courtroom rather, right, you're only really as effective, right, as your understanding of the other side, their position, their motivation, their fears. Right? That's the foundation of every great marketing campaign ever conceived. And if you work in a bubble, then you're going to basically only see one side of the story and get outmaneuvered very easily by competitors. The second thing I learned really about in law, which is probably the most primary one, is forensic listening. Not polite, not waiting my turn to listen, before, usually what happens is people kind of like, waiting for silence so that I can actually now start talking. It's around the kind of forensic listening where you really are reading the silences and the things that are left deliberately unsaid, right? But the truth be told, law was not my happy place, right? I wanted to work that pulled me towards the day, not pushed me through it. So, truth be told, I walked away with enormous amount of gratitude, with deep respect for my legal colleagues. I think law has an incredibly important place to play in society. But I decided, early that I would not spend my life working somewhere that I didn't want to make me glad to be there. And that's a very important component. Is just have the courage, right, to listen and the courage to leave what doesn't fit for you. I think that's quite an important component. Next. So what I did is, of course, coming from a traditional family, my parents both came from Lithuania, from Russian lineage, and I told my parents I'm leaving law and I'm going into marketing. Well, you can imagine. My parents said, "What are you talking about? What's he talking about?" So I didn't know how to do it. So what I did is I took a magazine. It happened to be a fair lady at the time. I opened up an ad. I showed it to my mom and I said, "Mom, this is what I do." So my mother looked at it. She said, "Yeah," she's happy. My father said, "Son, no, what does he do?" My mother said very clearly, with absolute, complete, unshakable confidence, "He's a printer." So just goes to show. But the truth be told, on a serious basis. My father, who came from Lithuania, he ran an outfitting store, in fact, in number 1 Elof Street, right across the road from Faraday Station. He couldn't speak English particularly well, but he could speak Zulu, he could speak Sutu, he could speak Xhosa, he could actually speak Shungan. In fact, he spoke all of the vernacular languages in South Africa. Why? Because he understood that people do not buy from those that they transact with. They buy from those who they trust. And my father was able to teach me that very important component, that trust is built in the language of the other person. So it's all very well to talk, but it's always put yourself into the shoes of the other consumer, of the other person. Talk in their language. It's if you've ever done neuro-linguistic programming, I think it's something worthwhile looking at. When you look at a person, you're able to see what their body language looks like. If the person's open, if they're closed, that's an important sign, because then you need to lean into where they're at and be where they're at. If a person is looking up, it means that they're actually thinking and visually. So then you can say to them, "I see what you say." If a person's looking down, it means that they're thinking emotively. You can feel what they're saying. If a person's looking from side to side, don't think that they're being, like evasive, not at all. They're actually thinking in words. And so you can actually read what they're saying, right? And I read you. And I think when you start talking in the language of the consumer, of your clients, right, of your prospects, then you're going to start getting an enormous amount of response. And it's actually fascinating. I've learned that lesson myself. I've sat in boardrooms where I haven't said a word. And I've simply looked at the chief executive and I've mirrored him, whether he was crossed and he was closing his arms, or whether he was opening, or whether he was actually opening the one side to let other people in. However he communicated, I subtly mirrored him. At the end of the meeting, it was fascinating. I didn't say a word, by the way. At the end of the meeting, he said, "I enjoyed you being in the meeting. Let's meet again." He just knew that I was responding to him, right? And that was an important component. Next, please. So effectively, when I decided, okay, I'm going into marketing, advertising, I opened up a design studio. The design studio became an ad agency. The agency really went from strength to strength. But when I started in the world of advertising, I really was quite joyously and joyfully overwhelmed. I loved it. I just loved it, right? But I tried to, because the law in me taught me that it's, I needed to be objective. I need to learn. I need to not just take a particular single point of view. So I started learning about the different philosophies of different agencies. I met and I worked with Hunter Scars, with Regis Scars and John Hunt. They had their philosophy of disruption, just to disrupt the marketplace. Ogilvy was about the unique selling proposition. Find a proposition that only you can own. In today's society, of course, it's not so easy to do that because technology will allow the competitors to take over very quickly. BBDO, and I was basically in my advertising career, I then, I went from being a partner in Marcus Katz Michael. We then joined forces with Mike Friedman and Mike Rossi, great advertising guys at Friedman Rossi. We then basically did a merger with BBDO, and I became a partner and brand planning director of BBDO. And they sent me off to New York, to Westchester, where they basically brainwashed me into the BBDO way. Well, BBDO was and is probably the largest communications group in the world at the time, and they had a fantastic philosophy, which is find a unique problem that only you can solve. So that was an amazing insight about problem detection, about understanding what the problem is in order to find solutions. Saatchi's positioning is about nothing's impossible. Joe Public is about creativity fused with simplicity. So it's about simplicity, which is a key component. At Friedman Rossi, in which I was a partner, we had a philosophy which was about make the customers feel genuinely good about the brand. Now, you may say, well, what's that about? That sounds a bit fluffy. The truth of the matter is it doesn't work that way. The way consumers purchase, right, is you usually purchase from your emotions, from your motive feeling, the feeling you have. And then people post-rationalize or rationalize their decision. Right? That's what happens. So, for instance, a bad salesman will sell a motor car. A better salesman will sell the speed of the car, and things like that. The next type of level will talk about the weight ratio, and all the things that go on inside of the vehicle. The best salesman sells status. You've made it. It should, it's the status. When you're buying a high-end motor car, it's about who you are, and the status that you want to believe, you want the market to believe you're in. Don't be subjective about it. Don't say, oh, hold on a second, that's very egocentric. It's not about you. It's about the consumer. You don't have to make judgment calls about the consumer. It's not about making judgment calls. It's about being objective and hearing it. What I did is I didn't choose one, either disruption or emotive communications or simplicity, right? Or nothing is impossible type philosophy. I didn't choose that. I learned from them all, right? And that became my edge, is that I could actually become, I could start building a learning relationships, and it actually is something that is able to give you more perspective. So I think it's important in whatever career that you're going into, be objective. Don't look at your competitors in a negative frame. Never look at your competitors. Respect your competitors. Enjoy what they're doing, right? Understand what they're doing. Learn what they're doing. Once you're able to do that, you're not sitting in judgment of them. You're not just pushing them aside and say they're no good. You might find yourself in a lot of trouble if you're to do that. So I think that's really important, is just to become a learning person in everything that you do. Next, please. The advertising agency was really exciting, and one of our large clients at the time was Edgar's. Edgar's at that stage was the #1 fashion retailer in South Africa, and Carol Grolman was the then marketing director, and she brought me into Edgar's, which was what our largest client, and she basically she was brilliant. She was a great mentor. I have so much respect for her. I'm really grateful for everything that she taught me. And I think what was important, because I eventually became the full board director of Edgar's, which was a very exciting time. I was with Edgar's for 8 years, which was a very exciting and enjoyable time. She taught me some beautiful insights. Things like sales now, a strategy for retail, which is sales now, brand tomorrow. What does that mean? Because you always hear brand agencies saying, oh, you got to build a brand. You do always have to build a brand. What is a brand? Let me just take a step back. Products are made in the factory. Brands are made in the consumer's mind. So what I mean by that is the tobacco rolled in paper, that's the product. The macho image of the cowboy man that copes so successfully with life in the slow lane, the camel man, that's made in the mind of the consumer. So we've always got to remember that, branding is about what's in the mind of the consumer, not what's in your mind. It's in the mind of your consumer. That is important. That's what branding is about. And it needs to be consistent. And you need to constantly grow your brand, the equity of the brand, which is you're building one on top of the other. And don't be inconsistent. You can't be, this fast, persona on the one hand and then become something completely different. Consumer will disregard you. So it's consistency in your branding. But the sales now, brand tomorrow philosophy in retail in particular, and by the way, I define retail as a sense of urgency, and most companies have a sense of urgency. So, I look at retail not as a retail store, but retail in fact as a sense of urgency in any business. So drive your sales, but every sale that you make needs to deposit, right, something, an element of your brand equity into that account. So constantly make sure that don't just discard your brand, and have, I'm going to run the sales. Every sale needs to contribute towards the brand for the future. You're building the equity of your brand, right, as you're driving sales, right? And I think that's really important to be ensured. And then what I also learned in my travels around the world with the Edgar's time was something really that I still use today, use it in most of the large corporate clients that we have blessed to have, and that is what I call the war room. Let me just explain what a war room is. A war room is not a war room that you give. A war is really you're fighting for a share of consumer's mind. You're fighting for a share of the consumer's wallet, and that's really what you're really doing. And so the J. Crew is where I learned the system from. They called it the wall room, WALL, and the reason is because they're on their wall. They had this massive picture, right? And they had like a 30 days out, 60 days out, 90 days out, 120 days out, etc. And that are 12-month like sections. And a war room basically is an opportunity to is to plan ahead. So typically what I'll do with some of the large corporates that we have, I'll plan 3, 4, 5, 6 months ahead with a client, right? And then of course at the end of every month, right, let's assume it's 120 days out. There's we'd like to have this symbolic bell, and the 120 becomes 90. Now, in the 120 day out war environment, what you're doing, you're able to plan ahead. What is the competitive environment? What are the trends that are taking place? In big retail organizations, they actually plan 10 months in advance. What we do at Edgar's, for instance, is I would then go 10 months in advance and say, right, let's just say for the moment it happens to be the December period, right? So I'll say, right now, what we saw last year is that gifting was a massive opportunity. Children becomes critical in over the December period, and then of course it's holidays. So the merchandise assortment needs to be designed so that it has the right open to buy allocations of merchandise that is relevant for the time. Now, that could be discussed with the chief executive and the buying executives in places like that, people like that. And that was strategic. It was, in other words, this is what the month should look like. We're talking about many months in advance. You can do it 3 months in advance or whatever it may be. But once you'd established what the strategic look would be for that particular month, then the following day, what would happen is that the buyers and the merchants would then come into the same war room once the chief executive had agreed, and the executive team had agreed what that future month was going to look like. Then the buyers were then required to say, look, this is what we're going to be doing in that month, and now I want you to take the open to buy, which is the budget allocations that each of the different departments have got, and then they buy according to the plan. And what happens very often in retail is that it goes the other way around, is that the marketing guys or the advertising guys, they basically tell, look, we bought this, now go and market it. And that can also be very, very difficult because you could be selling the wrong stuff, at the wrong time. And of course, that becomes an absolute disaster in the retail world. So the essence of a war room, right, is a system of forward thinking, but with weekly accountability. So in a war room, you typically take a calendar month, right, and say, right, what am I going to do in week one, in week two, in week three, in week four? It becomes important when it's payday, right? Mid-month, you can only start marketing things if you've got a prepaid customer that gets his salary on the 25th or at the end of the month, because you're going to lose the opportunity. So it's about creating that vision, right? And this is what we did, and this is what we learned in Edgar's. And that's what made Edgar's #1 in its class by some stretch some time ago. Okay, things happened in Edgar's, which is a whole story in its own right. You need a couch for that. But that was many years ago, and what happened. But I mean, you could see what I'm talking about. It's, the idea here is a corporate vision means nothing unless it's turned into habits of action that become habits of the heart. So it's about creating an overarching vision of where you want to be into the future, and then dissecting that into, right, obviously a mission which unpacks the vision, and then into a strategic plan of action, which goes down into actual daily routines to create action and habits of the heart. And I think that's in fact, in our agency in gas marketing, we saw, having come from the agency world and then having come from the corporate world, we found the gap was in response, because the agencies are there about winning awards and great creativity. The clients, the large corporates, are looking for sales and performance, and the two do not meet necessarily. And so we created this gap of evidence-based response marketing using advanced AI and automation systems, which works quite spectacularly. But that's another story. So I think, it's about creating a rhythm, right, and making sure that you set a vision. Not just about tactics, set a vision. What is it that you want to be? Where do you really want to be in terms of your business? And then bring it into daily actions, but do it in a forward planning process. You can't do it, I've got a vision today and I'm going to then execute tomorrow. That's not going to happen. You need to plan for it. It's like building a house. You can't say, I've got this dream house, and then it appears. Well, it doesn't. It starts brick by brick, and that's the nature of the world that we live in. And so play to the nature of what we've given, the reality. Next slide, please. Now, the next, I was with Edgar's, as I say, for 8 years. I had a really good time, and then I was offered a ridiculous deal to join a company at that stage called OfficeMart. And this is a lesson that taught me, and it's an important lesson for me, and that is, that we went into OfficeMart. We opened up a place near Santon, near the Santon Highway, and it grew so spectacularly well. It was unbelievable, and I was in that marketing space, just growing the brand and doing all those type of wonderful things. But the business didn't have the capability or the finances to be able to enable the resource for that success. And basically, what I learned in that really, really difficult time in my life was that you can actually grow a business out of business, because growth that's not aligned to your resources, it's not success. It's just a slow motion crisis waiting to mask, waiting, wearing the mask of momentum. It's not real momentum, and you get yourself into serious trouble. So it's always about making sure that you have the resources to be able to drive. You might have a beautiful idea, a wonderful idea. You want to rush into it. Well, when you start rushing into things, you're going to rush out just as quickly. So it's about planned, strategic, forward thinking, planning with real steps where you have got sustainability in terms of finances, whatever, resources that you're able to, if you don't have the resources, then you can still do it, but you just don't do it at a proper growth trajectory. Don't go too fast, because you can get yourself into trouble. And of course, today, with the digital world that we're living in, things can be sped up so much more than in the past. Next slide, please. Now, fascinatingly is that, after that horrible, terrible disaster for me personally, of OfficeMart, there was a reverse takeover by another company at the time, and that's what happened to OfficeMart. They transformed it into what you now know as Walmart. But basically, I was headhunted by MTN. I became the head of MTN, the marketing at MTN. And that was a very exciting time for me as well. Learning about technology. That's where I really learned about most technology. I spent about a year learning about the telco and the tech inside the telco and all the language that they teach you in these large telcos. And then it took me another year to find out that what they're talking wasn't exactly the way it's supposed to be. It was just talk. It was just, a lot of acronyms. I was very fortunate at that stage to then be appointed as the chief executive of the group's technical incubator, which we called Airborne. This was an amazing time. I spent years traveling virtually every country in the world, learning about wide and wireless technologies. And that's where I met my first real tech mentor, guru, I would call him, Ari Khan, a real technical genius. At that stage, MTN, gave me such a bucket full of money, you have no idea. And I just basically traveled to different countries, whether it was to America Online, Israel, obviously the most advanced technology you could ever wish to, right? From everywhere, you name the country, whether it was, sort of an Orange or BT or, all of the different telcos, I was able to go into those businesses. And the reason that they created this incubator was that they were buying massive technologies, and the technologies were supposed to be like, the new game changer, but they weren't, because technology-centric strategies usually fail. Right? It's consumer-centric strategies that are successful, enabled by technology. Even if you think about Facebook, you say, well, that's technology. Well, it's not really, yes, of course, it's enabled by technology, but it really started out with the universities, where Zuckerberg wanted to talk to his, other colleagues in universities, and that's where they started the whole Facebook environment. Of course, the technology was able to then create massive scale and speed, that's the way it is. So what was happening, and what does happen in telco and in technology, is people have become tech-centric. I think the most important thing here is not to be so tech-centric. No, don't be tech-centric, rather be consumer-centric, because that becomes really important. Because I found that there was technology in search of a problem. I remember once coming back from overseas and being interviewed by the press, and that was, there was a new tech that came out, which was called WAP. And it's guys that come that era, and that was going to be the new internet, WAP. And of course, they interviewed me in press, and they said, well, what do you think of WAP? I said, well, the name is right. WAP is correct. It's wait and pay, because that's what it was. It was slow. It wasn't instant. It wasn't customer-centric. It was a great technology that just was not ready for and right for the market. So I think what's really important about that is that technology in service of people who need it most is really important. And what we built, and this is a fascinating thing, very controversial, but it's real, and I'm going to just share it with you. What we built, we actually built a strategy in the Airborne, which is the digital incubator at MTN, was giving a voice to the voiceless, because in South Africa that's obviously a real issue. It's a real issue around the world. And what we did, and I'm sure some of you have seen and read, this massive Vodacom McCarthy spat, where McCarthy has just been given something around almost R500 million for what he said he invented Call Me. Well, let me let you a secret. He didn't invent Call Me, and I'll tell you why, and I have proof. At Airborne, our strategy was giving a voice to the voiceless. We developed Call Me. We developed it on USSD. We developed it on SMS, the star 1, 2, etc. And the model was very simple. You make a call to the person who hasn't got any money. They make a call. There's a ring on the other side, because it's a star logic, and the customer calls back, and the revenue is in the callback revenue. Now, how can I say that? Because the guys went to court and just won a lot of money. Well, we decided to patent that. So in the deeds office today, the patent, Call Me, is owned by MTN. You may ask, how come Vodacom was saying that they own Call Me, and McCarthy was saying that he invented Call Me? Well, in the deeds office today, Call Me it was registered in the name of MTN, and my technical person at the time was Ari Khan, who's now living in North America, and he actually, on behalf of MTN, he registered that patent in the deeds office. Fascinating story. Of course, how does this whole thing happen? Well, what Vodacom did, what MacArthur did, that's their business. That's completely their business. Not for me to start getting involved in the networks business. And the reason, very simply, is that even today, MTN happens to be one of our very big clients, and there's no ways I'm going to go and start talking about who owns what, because that's just going to be not really the thing to do. It just as a matter of interest is important. The important message and the lever that this gave me is really enrich the lives of other people. We built a strategy of giving voice to the voiceless. Out of that came Call Me. By the way, Call Me today is the largest value-added service in the country by a mile. We're talking about multiple millions of Call Me's that are run today, right? How MTN gave it up is a whole story in its own right. I don't want to go there. That's not really for today. I think today the issue is solve a real problem and scale, right? And scale, will take care of itself. Technology in genuine service of people who need it most. That's the kind of tech that's really worth building. What we're doing at the moment, we build pre-sales intelligence systems so we can score, sort of leads before, so that they're hot and they intend to make a purchase, as opposed to having call centers just phoning and just getting 1% response. We're getting at the moment between 40 and 50% response to the leads that our clients are getting from social to go through our pre-sales intelligence system before the call centers or the consultants reach those hot intent leads. That's an important component. Next slide, please. And then, of course, when I decided that it was time for me to leave MTN, because I've got this curiosity kind of environment, I decided that to leave MTN. But of course, it wasn't so simple. You don't just leave these big corporates. I was bound by a ridiculous restrictive trade. I wasn't allowed to work for anybody. I mean, anybody. So the only thing I was able to do is I actually went back to consulting. And when I was consulting, and a little bit before this, I was consulting in Australia, London, and South Africa. And I was doing the circuit, that type of circuit. That was very exciting. In Australia, I consulted to the David Myers Group, the David Jones Group, rather, sorry, and the Coles Myers Group. In Australia, in the UK, I was consulting to Grindley's group, bank, and in South Africa, to some large corporates. But what I did is I then started consulting again. And at that time, I met my partner, Gary. Now, this was an important thing in terms of something that is really important for me, and that is I needed to be able to become relevant to the marketplace. Very important. And Gary, who's my partner today, is a data expert, deeply technology-centric. He understands the architecture of information systems. It's like almost the same, sort of mastery that I understand the architecture of human persuasion. So together, we were able to really go in partnership in a really good, in a positive way. We were able to work together. Gary is in the detail, forensic, precise, technical. My feet, they're firmly placed in the clouds. That's how it works with me, right? So I'm able to think in terms of conceptual ideas, possibilities, positioning, etc. Gary builds the systems, makes those things possible, the possibilities real. So between us, we cover the altitude of what great marketing really requires, in our view. So that's an important component, right? But again, I think what's important in this whole message here is, we'll get onto it, right, in a moment. Let's go to the next one, because I'm run out of time. I know that. This is an interesting concept, which I think is very important for us to understand. We're living in a world today where storytelling is really important. Now, storytelling is entertainment. People enjoy it, then they go past. So we've reframed that, call it story selling. In other words, tell stories with intent. Tell a story that has got a commercial purpose with a precise intent to make a purchase or to take an action, right? And I think that's very important because the distance between a brand and a sale is filled entirely by the quality of the conversation between them. So storytelling is very important. Reframe your own words. Make it story selling. And suddenly you'll also understand that story selling is I'm telling a story, but there has to be an intent behind that, right? Now, I just want to stop for a moment. What I've been talking to you about is my history, right? A little bit about my past, right? That's basically what I've been talking about. But really what I've done, right, is through the stories that I've been talking to about my life in law, in the advertising world, with MTN, with the incubator, Airborne. Really what I'm doing is I'm just sharing with you some of the levers. I haven't taught you any levers. I'm just basically giving you a story, right, that is selling. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Okay, so that's a little bit about the past. Now, the present basically is really about the levers that I live by. So I'm going to go through them, relatively quickly, and then just leave, some that I think are going to be more important than others. But it's the way I live my life. So if you can go to the next slide, please. I think, so I think what's important because, I'm in that second phase of life. And I read a fantastic book by the name of guy Arthur Brooks. He writes a book called Strength to Strength. And what he says basically is that when you're young, you generate facts and you've got ideas and things like that. And he calls that fluid intelligence. It's raw analytical firepower, and that kind of thing peaks in your 30s, 40s, and sometimes in 50s, and then it starts to decline. And guys that are older that try and keep that going the whole time, find themselves starting to become a little bit regretting and start, living past their sell by that kind of thing. In reality, what happens is that when a person goes into the second phase of their life, they start building what's called crystallized intelligence. And that is, it's not, you stop with the major innovations, right? But what happens is actually you start creating pattern recognition. You start becoming a little bit wiser, right? I think that's important. So when you're young, you generate facts. When you're older, you know what they mean and how to use them. And I think that's become very exciting for me in my life. So you think about it now. Here I am, in my 70s, and I'm leading a digital AI automation response marketing business, right? That's what am I doing? Well, it's because I'm able to understand pattern recognition and be able to, develop that, which I'll talk about that in a moment. Next slide, please. The key operating system, which really I'm talking about here, is about having a growth mindset. Now, this is quite an important thing because it's personal disciplines. I practice them deliberately, right? And it really determines the quality of every day that I'm given. I think it's quite an important one as well. How I show up, how I think, how you connect, and how you stay cold. Right. And this is quite an important one for me. In fact, it's probably the most important. I'll go into this in a bit more detail, at the end of this session. But I think what's important is that we have to recognize, and I don't know if anybody has read the latest, a very good book to read, hard reading, but very good book to read, is Adrian Gore's Four Principles. He talks about, this idea of, in my words, I'm paraphrasing, sort of disciplined optimism. Because he talked, in scientific terms, that we're hardwired to be negative. And the reason we're hardwired to be negative is because if we weren't hardwired to be negative and fearful, we wouldn't be alive today. We'd be eaten by animals. We'd be eaten by the market. That's why we create communities. That's why we actually have, groups. And so what's very important is to be aware that we default into the negative framework, and negative framework is a danger. So I reposition and say, I'd live by a growth mindset, which I'm going to share with you in a moment as we're going to go through these levers. Next slide, please. So the first of the growth levers really is just enjoy the journey. It's quite a fascinating thing to think on, because it's hard, and especially when you start up small business, things aren't going the way you want to go. The journey is not the road to the work. The journey is the work. Right? Every morning, for example, I make a conscious choice to be present in the day. Right? I want to be present, right? Not to enjoy it, not to race, not to just to endure it rather, or race through it, but to inhabit it fully, right? The first conversation of the day that I have, the pool that my exercise happens to be in the pool, so I'll swim every day. And that really allows me, by the way, is, there's so much going on in the tech world and in the marketing world. When I go to swim, the idea is to take my mind, when you're in the pool, you're able, because you're in breathing, is to actually bring your mind into your breath, right? And so that you can actually clear your mind and then just focus on the breathing. It's a form of meditation for me, and it's what I do, right? Whether it's the sauna afterwards or prayer time, these are rituals of gratitude. I think it's a very important one, is, because the truth is we walk on this planet for a short time, right? So have the wisdom to just enjoy the journey, savor the process. Yeah, things are tough, but that's okay. When you go into the next of the levers, you'll see that tough times are actually times of great opportunity. It's only if you see it that way. If you don't, you don't. So I was mentoring somebody and they said to me, I can't do that. And I said to them, yeah, well, you're absolutely right. If you say you can't do it, you can't. Be right. You say you can do it, you've got a hell of a good chance of doing it. So it's having that, first of all, enjoying the journey, right? And know that the journey is the work. Next slide, please. Now, it's all very well to have, enjoy the journey, but you need to have discipline. And I think discipline, of course, it's discipline is self-respect. It's not the enemy of enjoyment. It's the architecture of freedom. It's actually a fascinating thing. To live a meaningful life, you need self-discipline, right? It's in the most expansive sense. Care for your body as though it's the most important piece of equipment you'll ever own. You know why? Because it is, right? Persist through difficult periods with the same creative energy you bring to your best work. We've always been through, everybody goes through real tough times, issues like I did with Office Smart, and how to reinvent myself. It became very important. I'll talk about reinvention at the end, which is such a critical component. If I leave you the one thing about reinvention, that would be fantastic. But physical discipline is cognitive. It's a cognitive discipline, right? They're not separate things, right? So, in year one, you are the business, by the way. It's not the business is separate from you. You are the business. So guard your energy the way you guard your biggest client relationship. Next slide, please. What I like to do in terms of problems that we live in, etc., instead of calling it the unique selling proposition as Ogilvy did, right? It's very, very successfully. I just like to call it the UPS, which is a bit of a mix of my teachings from the BBDO group. That is a unique problem to be solved. And think about this way. We talk about responsibility. We've all got responsibility. If you take responsibility and you separate the words, response, ability. I can't change the world, right? Things happen. That's reality. You can always respond effectively. So it's how your ability to respond to the marketplace becomes critical. So keep thinking about, responsibility is how I respond to the market around me, right? Because we all encounter difficulties. For every problem, there's an opportunity to be revealed, and a better outcome will be created. You can find a unique problem with precision and then build alternate solutions. I've built what I call hills and valleys, different types of strategic opportunity solutions to a particular problem. As I say, you can't change the macro environment, but you can always change the way you respond, right? That's quite an important thing. So you might want to do that. You might say to yourself, okay, I've got a problem. Just don't go with the lots of problems. Take one problem, right? Write down that problem, right? And then apply this UPS and say, this is a new unique problem that I'm going to solve. Have that mindset and you'll see what will happen. We'll get into a moment. Next slide, please. So in the day, right? I start the day, right? The way you start the day is how you're going to determine how you're going to live the day. Bless the day. I'll give an example. Okay, so for me personally, I wake up in the morning, I say, thank you, God, for giving me life today. And for those people that do the Hebrew thing, it's more De'ani, right? It's thank you, Lord, for returning my soul to my body. You have faith in me that you've given me life today. I've got life today. We are living today, and we're all blessed to have life today. So what we do at Gas Marketing, we've got teams, by the way. We've got a Johannesburg office, we've got a Durban office, a Cape Town office, and a Portuguese office, a Portugal office. We all come together in a creative review process every single morning at 9 o'clock in the morning. Every single morning, one member of the team, they take turns, and they're excited to take turns, by the way. They'll share a verse, they'll share a song, and then they'll offer a prayer to all of us as a team. And it's actually beautiful, And by the way, it's not about being a particular religion, because most of our teams have different religions. It doesn't matter. It's not about being in judgment. Remember about being objective. Just learn. My belief is unity through diversity. And so let the person pray in however they want to pray, and then give a prayer to all of us. And we do that every morning, right? And it's really the reason that we do that, the underpinning reason, it's a reminder that we're here to serve something larger than the next campaign brief, right? It's a bigger purpose, right? So start the meeting. You should do it yourself. Try it. Start the meeting, every meeting that you have this week, just in the morning, gratitude instead of an agenda. Right? The quality of what follows will surprise you. You allow the universe to play its magic when you connect to it. Up until, family, friends, whatever, when I'm really going through a tough time, I'll actually look out and look at, which I'm doing right now. I'll look out and I'll see a big tree, which I'm seeing. I'll look at that very top little leaf at the top of that tree. And that leaf is green and very lush and beautiful. When you cut that little leaf off today, by tomorrow it's withered and it's dead. That tree is sustained because of the tree, because of the infrastructure, the ecosystem, the roots. It's connected. Be connected. When you're connected, when you bless the day, right? When your team blesses each other, right? You will not, you'll see for yourself. I can't, I'm going to sound like a preacher, and I'm not. That's the last thing I am. But try it. You won't believe it. Okay, next slide, please. I'm going to go through something a bit quicker. Deep listening. I've spoken about listening, right? Most people are not listening, right? They want to give their opinion. True listening, the forensic kind, the one I spoke about, which I learned from law, is the kind that genuinely inhabits someone else's perspective. The single fastest route to a solution, right, is being relevant, that is relevant, trusted, and lasting, right? It's the skill of listening. Listen deeply. Listen between the lines, right? It's not passive. It's the most active form of intelligence gathering there is. Next slide, please. This is a fun one, especially with the team that we've got, our team, which are, actually we've got 14 humans, and we've got about 46 agentic agents working in our team. But, basically, what I'm very often in our business is I'm accused of telling corny jokes, dad jokes. Well, I'm guilty as charged, because the truth is, when you can laugh, it's so much easier to see the lighter side of a difficulty, right? To keep perspective when pressure mounts, to keep human warmth in the room that might otherwise become too serious for its own good, right? Laughter is not a distraction from the work. It's often what makes work possible, right? So notice whether your team laughs, right? If they've stopped, there's something wrong. Have fun, because after all, we're here, we're not here for a long time. We're here for, we're here, but let's have a fun time while we're here. Next slide, please. Be a learning organization. I'm mindful of the time. Being a learning organization is, in other words, develop your talents, right? It's an always on life journey. Build your library of knowledge constantly. Read, blogs, lectures. Yeah, okay, today in our social world, we like becoming mindless, just scrolling. In fact, we're finding in marketing that people's attention spans have actually reduced so much that you've got really 4 or 5 seconds to win if you're lucky. Sometimes you only got 3 seconds to win in campaigns because of this whole scrolling philosophy. What I like to do is reread books. I like to enjoy, I've finished books and I want to see if they still stand the test of time. I enjoy reading real books. I can concentrate more easily. That's me personally. right? Everybody's got their own way. But for me, the physical act of turning a page is something the screen can't replicate for me, right? And of course, and I've got, in addition to being a learning organization, in books, spiritual leaders like Rabbi Zolber, like John T. Mayer, great ontological coach, the late Rabbi Sachs, which I read every single day. These great mentors, spiritual mentors, and this is only a spiritual side, right? They guide me profoundly, right? As any commercial relationship will have. But it's all about learning one thing this week that's going to make you better. Knowledge is the bucket that fills all the others. I think it's such an important thing to become a learning person, and then in your business to be a learning organization. Next slide, please. Um, you know, the people that work for me, because they're younger, and more dynamic, it's actually quite a fascinating thing. They're my greatest mentors. Apart from my former mentors, right? My team, the team at Bushi and Rourke and Gary and Angelique, and our team, right? Apparently they are my mentors. They actually teach me all the day, every day, right? They're young, they're dynamic, they're talented, right? And the more you can learn from the people around you, especially working out, right, how to apply new AI, how to apply automation that's already genuinely customer centric. Learn from let them be your mentors. Learn from them. Just because you happen to be a boss, it's not that don't be an autocratic boss. Be someone that's learning from the people around you. And the day I stop learning from the people around me is the day I stop being useful to them, right? Ask your youngest team member to teach you something this week. It could be a friend. Just ask somebody and use it. You won't believe what you can actually learn from other people. Next slide, please. I've spoken about this. I'm not going to go into too much, but I'll just in terms of in your business, I think it's important just to enrich the lives of others. We when it came to Airborne, it was about giving a voice to the voiceless. That was why we created Call Me and things like that, and other technology innovations as well, right? But this is really, it's been my North Star since Airborne. In fact, what we've done at GAS is we created a unit called Gas for Growth. And, we use our marketing knowledge and our technologies to uplift underserved communities. So, for instance, with Ort South Africa, we're building a conversational AI agent. It's an always-on multilingual trainer for learners, underserved learners, as it happens in this particular one on a big data course. It operates 24/7 on WhatsApp. It answers questions all the time with the technology of the information. Being fed back into a data-centric repository so that the client can see exactly what type of questions have been asked and where there are gaps in their training, which is really important. So technology in genuine service of people who need it most, critical component. Find one thing that that could change someone else's week. Give it away. Generosity compounds, really important components in a life and in a world full of the I. What's in it for me? Be beyond that. Next slide, please. You talk about creativity in an agency, and say, oh, well, creativity, people just come up with sparks. It's all chaos. It's not chaos. Real creativity is not the product of chaos. It's a product of focus. When you know precisely what that problem is you're solving, right? For whom, why it matters, right? That's when genuinely great creative ideas come from, right? Build clarity first. That's important. John Hunt from Hunt and Scorers, he taught me, right, the same truth from the other side. Disruption is not chaos. It's the product of extraordinary clarity. The more clear you are in what you want to do, the more creative you can be. So the tighter the brief, the better the creativity, because otherwise you'll end up doing beautiful creativity that's not relevant. And you see it all the time. Just watch what goes on in terms of advertising today. Look at campaigns and say to yourself, well, what does this mean? Is it going to move the needle? Is it going to make me go and buy something from that client because they say something beautiful and soft and lovely? Is it going to move the needle? Very important, right? And you can only break convention effectively when you understand it completely, by the way. So before your next campaign, write down the problem, the person, why it matters, get clear, then get creative. Next slide, please. This is one I learned from the chief many years ago from the chief executive at as it happens at the MTN Group. Make a difference that makes a difference, right? About prioritizing is not about doing less. It's about ensuring what you do is meaningful, right? Don't get caught up in being busy, right? A mentor taught me to ask one question: does this make a difference? That makes a difference. If the answer is no, don't do it. Take the right. So apply a filter to every task. Next slide, please. Simplicity is not the absence of sophistication, it's the highest expression. Make complex issues simple. Consumers understand simple communication. Complexity becomes very difficult, and it's really important to know that. In marketing, in leadership, in life, the person who can take a complicated truth and express it with clarity and elegance is the most powerful person in the room. And then, of course, the next lever for me is about synchronicity. Next slide, please. Synchronicity is such an important thing. We do it in our business. In fact, synchronicity is in the gas. Gas are actually our values, gas marketing. G is for gratitude. The A is for being authentic, especially in the marketing world. And the S is for synchronicity. It's when we work together, right? It's when everything moves in the same direction. When you have a common vision, then the results are exponential. Coordination, teamwork, harmony, right? They create an environment where the sum is genuinely greater than its parts. And that's what we do. It's not just a cultural aspiration, it's a commercial discipline. It's what we do. And so that's an important aspect in terms of synchronicity. And then the next slide, please. And that is, be optimistic. To be frank, I know it's our default, as I said earlier on, is be pessimistic, be fearful. That is how we default. If you want to break out of the clutter, optimism is not naivety. It's a deliberate orientation towards possibilities. You can't think about it. You think about it, to be frank with you, pessimism is quite depressing if we think about it. It's also commercially very destructive. The leader who sees obstacles as signals to retreat will always lose ground to the leader who sees them as puzzles to be solved. And in the years that I've been working, I've never seen a pessimist build something great. Next slide, please. Humility, of course, is a leader humility is that lever that protects all the others. Strange growth there, lever, but it's actually important. We all have egos. Of course, we've got egos. But when your ego starts getting in the way of business, it's a problem. It derails a growth trajectory, and it's when things are going well. And we often find that that adage that says that success breeds failure. That's only when, right, the executives begin to believe they know it all. They stop listening. They stop learning. They stop being curious, right? So humility is not a weakness. It's a discipline of keeping the door learning openly, permanently open. That's a really important thing. Say, I don't know out loud. Say it. Just say it. It's sometimes, as a boss, not easy to say, but say it. And you'll find that you get fantastic responses and answers. Next slide. Obviously, the next slide, of course, is prioritization. Everybody to his own, but prioritizing family and creating a sanctuary is really important. To protect your home with the same rigor that you bring to the most important client that you have is really important. When in my early married life, my wife and I used to meet outside the house. We used to smoke a peace pipe, believe it or not. Actually, it was a cigar. Right? And we would resolve anything that needs to be resolved outside the home. There was no swearing. We never swear in a home. There's mutual respect. There's support. That's important. Of course, discovery came and couldn't smoke cigars, so that stopped. But the principle remains, right? Really important to just make sure that you create a sanctuary. Now, whether you're married or not, it doesn't matter. The point is, create a sanctuary. Create a safe space. Create a space where you can actually be safe in your own home, right? And that's really important, and defend it. It's a really important component. And then, of course, the crown lever, which is the last of the levers. Next slide, please. And that is reinvent yourself, right? This is a lever that I do regularly every single year. It's the one that makes each of the others repeatable, right? You've got to leave the baggage. You've got to create an ideal future. Next slide, please. No, I'm just going to give you an example of what I mean by reinvention. So, okay, in the Jewish year, we're going towards what's called Rosh Hashanah, which is the new year, and the whole period of Rosh Hashanah, and then there's the fast, and then there is Sukkot. Those are the time that we're about to enter into. The conventional reading is, okay, it's the time of Rosh Hashanah is the time of judgment, right? So you're going to be judged. Well, you're going to be judged for the year that passed. Well, I can tell you now, if I'm judged for last year, I'm a goner. I got no chance. I like to reframe that. I say, hold on a second, Rosh Hashanah, that's the head of the year. And it's the beginning of the year. We don't actually have the new year at the last year, the last day of the old year. We have it at the first day of the new year, right? So when you have the first day of the new year, what am I being judged on? I want to be judged on who I want to be, who I intend to become. So I create a vision of who I want to be. What are the values that I want to live by? What is the strategy? What is the way I want to be, show up to myself, to my family, to my community, right? How is that? Then judge me on who I want to be, right? The person that I'm walking into in the new year. I think that's such an important thing. Yes, it's an energy of introspection, but it's turned forward instead of leaning backwards. And I think that is a really important component. And I know that, I have got other slides, but I think that for the purpose of today, because I'm mindful of time, I just want to say that this is probably the most important one for me is reinvent yourself. It's such an important thing. When I decided to partner with Gary, and I was, at that stage when I was in my consulting practice, I was running a very successful consulting practice, traveling in different countries and being my own judge. I knew I needed to become relevant to the market. And so therefore, because Gary is so tech-centric, and he has the strengths that I don't, it's such an important component. I think this is really great. I think this is such an important aspect to just basically reinvent yourself every year. Be the new person because you can. It's all in your mind. It's how you want to show the year ahead. So every year I take this time of the year because it's the head of the year for me, right? And I reinvent myself now. By the way, I then take this process a little bit further because we go into New Year, which is Rosh Hashanah. Then we all go into Yom Kippur, which is a fast day. Now, in order to be the person you want to be, you've got to clean yourself of the person you were. So the Yom Kippur is a time that you cleaning yourself from who you were. And then we go into Sukkot. You then walk into a little, scantily sort of little hut outside your own home. In other words, don't get so caught up in the, in the finances and in the physicality. Go out, know that you're actually in the, that there's something bigger than you. There's a godly, whatever you want to call it, right? There is a great orderly design that is bigger than you, right? And once you've been through that reinvention, cleaning yourself, and then spending 8 days in a place that is not in physicality, right? Then you can go to the world, and then you can live a world which is a great world to live. I'm lucky. I'm fortunate. I love what I do. Here I am, and be the author of your next one. Don't be the sum of last year. Be the author of the next one. I think I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to ask if you've got any questions or if I overstayed my welcome.
Sam, we are on 3:05.
Sorry, I'm 5 minutes late.
So if everyone is comfortable for you to wrap up, then I see Tsakani has raised a hand.
Sure.
Yes, please. Thank you so much, Sam, for sharing all your experiences. Impressive. We've learned a lot from it. I've got a marketing question.
Tsakani, do you have a question?
Yeah.
Yes, I do have a question. My question is it's a marketing question. So Sam, let's say for example, you're selling a black cap, right?
No.
And everything.
Yeah.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, Sam can hear me. Let's say, for example, you're selling a black cap, Sam, right? And that is what you're marketing, right? But then
Sam, I don't see any other questions in the chat, and no one has raised their hands.
Yeah, no, so sorry, I can hear you talking. So if you want to carry on.
Please can we hear the answer and the question?
Yes, let's do that. Okay, yeah. Carry on with your question, please.
Okay. You're selling a black cap, right, in the market, right? But the clients, when they come to you, they are looking to buy a blue cap. Right. So I'm trying to understand what is the buyer behavior in that concept. How do you define that? And the good thing about that, Sam, is that the black cap is increasing brand visibility, but then they are not buying that black cap. I'm just giving you a scenario. How do you deal with something like that?
Okay, so you're talking about a marketing process, which I think is an important one, by the way. It's a very good question because, I mean, we're all faced with these types of problems. The first thing that we need to do in terms of anything that you're going to do in terms of marketing is that good old-fashioned KYC, know your customer. So before you're starting to sell anything, right, first understand the needs, the perception, the behavior. Who is your target market, right? What are their needs? What are their perceptions? It's not about me selling you something. It sounds like Ford. You can have a black car or a black car or a black car. That's why they got themselves into trouble. It's not really about the black cap. It's really about understanding the consumer, right? Understanding what their needs, their perception, their behavior is. I think that's the very first element that one has to understand very clearly. Once you've understood who the consumer is, right, and what they are, then what you're going to do is you're going to build a brand positioning rather in the mind of the consumer. What is it, right? You've understood what the consumer is. You understand their needs, their perception, their behavior. Now you want to be able to match your product with the consumer. Now, the way you do that is quite fascinating. It comes from many years ago, a book by Recent Trout, actually, called Positioning Battle for the Mind. Take what exists in the marketplace, right, and attach it to your product. Let me give you an example. Nike, right? Nike used Usain Bolt, right, the fastest man in the world at the time, right? Just do it. That was their whole positioning. What they did is they took someone who was the fastest man wearing Nike shoes, right? So now the positioning for the clients is, for prospects is, well, if he's the fastest man in the world and he's wearing Nike, then I'm going to buy Nike because I also want to be the fastest man. Not quite the fastest man, but I want to be faster, right? Taking what's in the mind of the consumer and attaching it to your product. So it's very important. Products are made in the factory, brands are made in the consumer's mind. So, before I'm going to start mass producing a black cap, I'm going to find out if the market is actually into black caps. That becomes more important. So don't get yourself caught up in selling a black cap when the market doesn't want a black cap. That's an important aspect. I mean, I obviously need to unpack that in more, right? Yes, you can have my email. My email is sam@gasmarketing.co.za. sam@gasmarketing.co.za. You can ask me whatever questions you like. Any other questions? Is there anything else? Yeah, that's it. Great. I see that there's just stuff in the chat, but I haven't seen what's in the chat as well, so I apologize.
Hi, Sam. For some reason, I can't raise my hand using my laptop. I'm so sorry, guys. I'm raising my hand now.
The reason is Zoom, by the way.
Whoa.
Use Teams, use Google Meet. Those are the new ways of communication. Zoom is just... What's the question?
Yes, I'd like to just pick your brain on, I mean, we speak now on consumers, and I'm assuming it almost gives a B2C type of component. When it comes to B2B, on our part, we are manufacturers of textured coating. So we are looking to speak to people like your architects, your interior designers. So when you try and do this brand positioning, what they want, does that really work when it comes to the B2B client? Or what would be the best positioning element if you want to then, touch base with those people to position your product appropriately?
Okay, so yeah, business to business it does work slightly differently, but you have to realize one thing, which is a very important aspect, is that B2B, you're still dealing with human beings. You're still dealing with real people. Right? When it comes to B2B, you need to understand that the customer, the consumer that you're talking to is looking for something different. They're looking for increased productivity. They're looking for a different offering that is going to make their business more efficient, more effective. Acquisition, retention. So if I was, there's an acquisition component, there's a retention component. So you need to start leaning into their, what it is that they're looking for. So if you've got textured coating, is what makes your product different and better? Why would a company use your brand instead of a competitor brand? And it needs to be in terms of the efficiencies of the business that is so important. That is important. So again, on one foot, it's a B2B. We do a lot of B2B businesses ourselves. And what we do is we go from social media. What we do is, you can use something like LinkedIn. LinkedIn is really a networking medium. It's not a great medium for response. But what we do is, so we'll get brand reputation in LinkedIn, but we'll we'll still go into a Facebook, because you can get more response out of Facebook, believe it or not. And even nowadays, TikTok to the old market, you won't believe how important it is. What we do is we go from the social campaigns that we do, and we redirect the customer right into a very simple message about, an example is, call me to give me, so I can give you a free taste test. Can I, or something like, let me, just give me 15 minutes of your time so that I can demonstrate to you why our service is different and better. But again, once you understand the client, and who your target audience is and what their issues are, you're able to then structure your positioning that is relevant to them. To consumers, it's different. Consumers are more emotively driven and then post-rationalize their decision-making. When it comes to businesses, they are more financially oriented in terms of making my business better, right? More efficient, grow it, whatever it may be. That becomes important. AI, I'm actually going to be doing another seminar, I think next week, I don't know exactly, I'll be told by Ort, on AI. We use AI all the time. Just remember one thing about AI. I think it's an important thing. Don't think for 1 second. And I think I've actually put it in this slide. That's right. So let me just see it. Won't you just go to the next slide, please? Sorry, can you just go to the next slide, please? No, doesn't matter. Can you hear me still?
Yes, Sam, we can hear
Right.
you.
Just go to the next slide again, because there's something that I've actually spoken about. Just keep going. Next slide, please. Press the next slide.
Kat, can you go on to the next slide?
Okay, and I'm not going to go through all of these. This is an audio event because we haven't got the time for this. Keep going. Next slide, please. I just want to get to the last slide. Kat, can you do the next slide? Maybe you just tell her, maybe she can't hear me.
Excellent, yes.
Okay, next one. Next one. Good. And then keep going. Right. Okay, stop there. Okay, just go. Yeah, I may as well just carry on. Okay, yeah, so go back right now. I think for me, what's really important about AI and the way things work in AI is this. Don't be afraid of what's coming next. Never be afraid of what's coming next. I think it's so important for you to celebrate what's coming next and use it to your advantage, right? The human being is not going to be replaced by AI. That is a negative, as I said, pessimistic view. Oh, I'm going to lose my job. Oh, yeah. If you say that, you are. You're right. You're going to lose your job. But rather say, I'm going to use AI to my benefit. I've got my own AI agents, right? Personally, I've got my own AI agents. So I'll develop a strategy and I'll give it over to my agent, my AI agentic agent, who's learning my brain, right? And it will then give me solutions at scale. You're going to straight ChatGPT and ask questions, you're going to get yourself into trouble. The AI is a subject in its own right. I will be talking on AI next week. So if you want to tune into the next webinar, I'll be talking a little bit more about AI and how I use AI and how our business uses AI. Because all I can tell you, it's a great invention. It's basically a signaling process. It's an algorithm and signaling. It's not going to take over from you. If you work it, if you work with it, if you in command, and it basically will then scale at, and give you at speed, then it works fantastically well for you. But it's just my final state is use things, love people, worship the divine. That's what Arthur Brooks says. It's what I believe in personally. So thanks for staying. Thanks for hearing me. I mean, I know there are lots of other questions. I don't know how it works in the bootcamp environment. It's my first one, but thank you, and start reinventing yourself. It's fun. Life is fun if you make it fun. It's horrible if you make it horrible. Your call.
Thank you very much, Mr. Michael. Thank you.